with a heavy rain at times this weekend. Here's a live look from our WVTM 13 studio camera, 46 degrees. About the same as we were yesterday. We don't have the rain around though, so that is going to help your commute into work and school. Later today, we end up in the low 50s, a mainly cloudy sky, a little bit cool. Low chance for a shower today, but you really see that chance for rain going up tomorrow and Sunday. Those are our impact days, and I wanted to quickly map it out for you hour by hour. So first warning future track, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. See a little bit of pink possible, mainly over northwest Alabama. That's where we can see a quick burst of a wintry mix. That wintry mix continues through the morning hours over northwest Alabama for communities like Hamilton, Arley, Coleman, Jasper to Fayette. And then as we get towards 5 p.m. tomorrow evening, you start to see more of the green showing up. And that would be a steady rain that spreads across central Alabama during the evening hours tomorrow. Also want to point out we could have some cooler air trying to push in from the east, and that could lead to a little bit of a wintry mix over East Alabama late Saturday into early on Sunday. We do believe this will cause limited impacts though across central Alabama. Most of those high impact problems are going to be well to our north over extreme North Alabama into Tennessee. Very heavy rain though through the day on Sunday. Some folks could pick up more than 2 inches. I'm going to talk more about this weekend forecast coming up in just a few. This morning we feel pretty similar to yesterday. We are in the 40s. However, we are not dealing with the rain. So that is an improved forecast from this time yesterday. I would say grab the umbrella just in case there's a low chance for a shower today. Most of you won't see one otherwise. Cloudy sky, and we end up in the low 50s during the afternoon. Of course, looking ahead towards the weekend, we are still tracking a large winter storm that's going to impact much of the United States. Winter weather advisories cover much of North Alabama. We're going to break this down for you in more detail, what this means for us coming up in just a few minutes. 13 today, we've got clouds in the forecast. Temperatures end up near 50 degrees. Most of us dry today, but there is a low chance for a shower. Of course, tracking heavier rain though at times this weekend, with the possibility of a few minor wintry issues north and then also in East Alabama, where some cooler air will try to work in from Georgia. All of us turn much colder early next week. We're talking about temperatures in the teens Monday morning. So whatever moisture is left on the roads could potentially cause some slick spots out the door on Monday morning. So that is something we are going to be watching carefully. But for this weekend, you see those temperatures in the 40s. We still look to be above the freezing mark across much of central Alabama. So although, yes, there will be a winter storm, it looks like it's mainly a soaking rain for much of our area. Some could see a brief transition to a wintry mix, and I am going to break that down for you in more detail in just a second. But risk of major impacts stays to our north. Coming up in just a few minutes, we are going to track this winter storm hour by hour coming up. We'll see you then. What we're tracking over the next couple of days, we do have impact weather this weekend and into early next week. Saturday, rain arrives, a wintry mix possible at times over north and northwest Alabama. Then on Sunday, we're talking about a steady rain, some minor wintry issues north. We're also going to be monitoring East Alabama carefully. And then there could be some storms across the southern half of the state where we have a little bit more instability. All of us much colder Monday, morning low in the teens. Some slick spots are possible on the roads as you're headed into work or school. So that's a developing forecast that we will be fine tuning through the weekend. Here's the latest in terms of our winter weather alerts, where you see the purple counties here over northwest Alabama, ice storm warning. So that tells you this is where we're most likely to have some of that accumulating ice that could cause some issues. Winter weather advisory for all of these counties here in purple. And then for Calhoun and Cleburne counties, we do have a winter storm watch. We'll be monitoring to see if some of that cool air can move in from the east from Georgia. That could cause a brief changeover to a wintry mix over East Alabama. So in terms of those impacts, we are expecting some ice accumulation over northwest Alabama. That's where we have that ice storm warning. And then with the pink area here, that's where we're expecting a limited risk. So Hamilton, Fayette, Jasper, Coleman, Oneonta, Gadsden, into northern Calhoun County near Jacksonville. That's where we could have a brief changeover at times to a wintry mix, with most of everybody south of I-20 just experiencing a cold rain, even some thunder possible at times on Sunday. So I wanted to break that down for you hour by hour. First warning future track. We're going to start it this evening, 11 p.m. and we're still dry at that. Arrive in Alabama. Here's lunchtime tomorrow. You see the pink. That's that possibility of a wintry mix or some freezing rain over north and northwest Alabama. The rest of central Alabama looks to be mainly dry during the first half of the day, but by 9 p.m., you see an increase in green. That is steady rain for much of our area, with the exception being that wintry mix that continues over North Alabama. Watch what happens into Sunday. So you start to see some of that pink sliding in here. That is the possibility that some of that cold air could cause a brief changeover over East Alabama. The rest of us, especially during the day Sunday, getting a steady soaking, and there could be a few storms south of I-20 during the day on Sunday. Most of us picking up anywhere from 2 to 3 inches of rain. So this is going to be a heavy rain producer. We do need the rain, so we are happy to have it in the forecast, but where that temperature is hovering near or just below the freezing mark, it could come as freezing rain at times. So I've put on the map here the potential ice accumulation. And where you see the pink, that's where we could at times have that brief change over to a wintry mix. And those are some of the communities that we'll be watching carefully. You do see a lot of impact days as we head into next week. That is for the risk of some really cold temperatures. So once again, for the weekend, just want to highlight what we're tracking. If this is the first time checking back in a few days, we are looking at more of a rain situation due to those temperatures increasing by a few degrees Saturday through Sunday. Some ice possible north. Limited accumulation, though, across our area. We'll actually be watching for a little bit of localized flooding concern with those 2 to 3 inches of rain likely. Into early next week, we are talking about some really cold air around. So any leftover moisture could start to freeze on those roads, and we could have some slick spots to get you out the door Monday. So it's really important that you are checking back on the forecast through the weekend. And then, but at least we're not talking about as much rain as we had yesterday. We will keep the sky mainly cloudy. Temperatures end up in the 50s after a morning in the 40s. So all around kind of a chilly day. But of course, looking towards the weekend, we bring in better rain chances. Saturday through Sunday, we've got impact days, 2 to 3 inches of rain expected. This is going to be beneficial rain. We are in need of it, but it is going to come with the risk of some ice north. So we're talking mainly over North Alabama, and then a wintry mix possible over East Alabama as well. So limited ice accumulation, some localized flooding though, and we're going to talk about this in much more detail coming up in the next half hour. This weekend, thank goodness we trended in that warmer direction. Man, if models would have panned out the way that they were looking earlier in the week, we would be talking about a major ice storm. That is not going to be the case, though. Thankfully, we've got mainly just rain in the forecast with a wintry mix at times. I wanted to break that down for you hour by hour. I know a lot of folks are wondering about the weekend. You're trying to make those plans. You can see those temperatures in the 40s each day. Let's start early tomorrow morning. This is 8 a.m. and you do see a little bit of pink showing up. Now, there will be times this weekend where we could see a transition to a quick burst of some wintry precip. However, I don't expect any widespread heavy impacts from this system for central Alabama. Lunchtime, we do still have a wintry mix falling from Lamar County into Marion, Winston, Walker, Coleman. That's where we could see a little bit of an ice accumulation from this, a limited impact there. Elsewhere, a heavy, steady rain, especially as we make it into Sunday. So I wanted to stop the clock early Sunday morning. This is 2 a.m., so a lot of you asleep at this point. But notice what starts to happen over East Alabama. We start to pick up on a little bit of those pinks here. That's from some of that wedging, so cold air moving in from Georgia could also cause a brief transition in East Alabama at times on Sunday. And then watch all this heavy rain. There could even be a few thunderstorms involved with this. South of I-20, we're actually trending so warm that we could have enough instability to hear some thunder as these storms roll through Sunday afternoon. And then eventually that rain comes to an end late Sunday, followed by much colder air. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a few. Similar to yesterday, we are in the mid 40s. However, we don't have the rain, so that's good news. We are looking at a cloudy sky throughout much of the day today. We are going to be in the mid 40s right around lunchtime as well, so temperatures not moving all that much, ending up in the low 50s later this afternoon. So you are going to want a jacket at times today, but you don't necessarily need that rain gear. Over the weekend, we will need it. We're talking about some heavy rain across central Alabama. Look at all of these colors you see on the map here. These are all different winter weather alerts due to that winter storm expected this weekend. Now over Alabama, we do have an ice storm warning in northwest Alabama for all these darker purple counties here. That's where most of the impacts will be felt from this system. Winter weather advisory for the light purple counties. We'll be watching these very carefully for limited impacts, and then winter storm watch for Calhoun and Cleburne. We're going to break down in more detail the impacts expected coming up in just a few minutes. 4:44 today. We've got clouds in the forecast, but we're mainly dry. Temperatures are going to be on the chilly side. We end up in the low 50s this afternoon. But look at the weekend. We've got impact weather. Fortunately, we're not looking at an ice storm for central Alabama. This is going to be mainly a rain event for most of us. Now that we have continued to trend a little bit warmer, there could be some minor wintry issues over North Alabama, Northwest Alabama, and also in East Alabama. So we'll be watching that, but we do expect limited impacts from the system. But all of us feeling the cold early next week, temperatures in the teens by Monday morning. That means we could have some slick spots on the road early Monday from some of that leftover rain. So we'll be watching that through the weekend. But Saturday and Sunday, you see those rain chances very high. There is going to be a winter storm. It just looks like for our area, it's mainly a soaking rain. There could even be some thunder involved, especially south of I-20 during the day on Sunday, with some locations dealing with the wintry mix. Any kind of risk of major impacts looks to stay to our north. So I wanted to map it out for you here. Where you see the red color, that's where we could have some ice accumulation from this. So we're talking northern Marion County, north of there into northwest Alabama, Russellville, Florence, we're watching carefully. Limited risk for Fayette, Jasper, Hamilton, Coleman, Oneonta, Gadsden. South of there, mainly just a cold rain. We'll be breaking this down in much more detail coming up in just a few minutes. We're there for this weekend all week long. And fortunately, it does still look like most of us are just going to get a cold rain out of the system. So for tomorrow, rain arrives. Wintry mix possible over North Alabama, but limited impacts from that. And then a really steady rain on Sunday. In fact, we could even hear some thunder south of I-20 with minor wintry issues possible for a few locations. We're going to break those down in much more detail. All of us, though, Monday, in the teens. It is going to feel very, very cold. We've got Arctic air on the way. That could lead to some slick spots possible on the roads early Monday morning as you're headed into work or school if we have any leftover moisture on the road. So that's going to be a developing forecast that we follow through the weekend. Here's the latest in terms of our winter weather alerts. Where you see the darker purple here, that's an ice storm warning. So that tells you where we are most confident to have accumulating ice from this system this weekend. So that is just north of our area. But looking at the light purple here, winter weather advisory for Lamar, Fayette, Marion, Winston, Walker, Coleman, Blount, Etowah, Cherokee, and then we do have a winter storm watch for Calhoun and Cleburne counties. We're going to be monitoring whether or not some of that cold air from Georgia can make it into Alabama from the east Sunday, and that would lead to a wintry mix possible for some of our easternmost communities. But breaking it down for you here, some ice accumulation possible within the red zone. Limited risk, but a changeover to a wintry mix at times for Hamilton, Fayette, Jasper, Coleman, Oneonta, Gadsden, and then really along into the south of I-20. Most of us just seeing rain out of this, some heavy rain at times, 2 to 3 inches, and even some thunder possible Sunday afternoon. So let's break it all down here in our first warning future track. Wanted to start this evening at 11 p.m. and we're still dry at that point, but watch what happens. 3 a.m. you start to see some of that wintry weather to our west. Early tomorrow morning, there could be a little bit of a wintry mix over North Alabama. That continues through lunchtime, and this could lead to a quick chance for a little bit of that ice accumulation. But as we make it through the day Saturday, look at all that green arriving. That's because we are warm, we're above the freezing mark, and we're talking about mainly a rain situation. On Sunday, I talked about some of that cold air trying to move in from the east. Well, you can see that happening here, transitioning some of that rain into a wintry mix over East Alabama during the day Sunday. And then look at all that heavy rain that continues to push across the state on Sunday. This band here is what could cause some thunder in a few locations south of I-20. And then eventually all that rain comes to an end late in the day Sunday, and then we will be watching for potential of some slick spots by early Monday as those temperatures drop off significantly. So here's where we could see a little bit of minor accumulation. We're talking about that possibility for some of those communities that are included in that winter weather advisory, also in that winter storm watch area. But most of our area, just a cold rain from this Saturday into Sunday. And then look what happens early next week. You see all of these impact icons here. Those are for temperatures that are going to be very, very cold each morning. We're talking single digits and teens in many cases. Wanted to highlight Monday just to show you that we do have a lot of spots dipping into those teens. This is what could cause a flash freeze of any of that leftover moisture. And it's around temperatures in the 40s right now. By the afternoon, we end up close to 50 degrees. We've got clouds in the forecast, but we look to be mainly dry. Most locations don't have to deal with much in the way of rain today, but that's not going to be the case over the weekend. In fact, we're tracking some very wet weather, especially on Sunday. 2 to 3 inches of rain possible through the weekend. Some icing north, limited ice accumulation though, mainly looking at potentially some flooding for a few communities with that heavy rain. We will break down the weekend forecast in much more detail. Some icing concerns over North Alabama. Let's break it down for you in much more detail here. We've got temperatures both Saturday and Sunday in the 40s, so we're above that freezing mark. And as we move into early tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., you see a little bit of pink. There could be a quick burst of some wintry mix across parts of central and North Alabama. No impact from that, but where we continue with the pink at times tomorrow over northwest Alabama, say for Hamilton, Arley, into Coleman, even as far south as Jasper, there could be a light accumulation of some ice, but that mainly transitions, I should say, over to a rain situation by 5 p.m. Saturday, and then throughout Saturday evening, most of us just dealing with a cold rain. There is also a chance into early Sunday we get a little bit of cold air working in from the east. That could cause a quick changeover to some of that pink that you see there. So some wintry mischief possible in terms of the impacts, so they look to be very limited for central Alabama. During the day Sunday, the big story is going to be lots of heavy rain, and we could even hear some thunder south of I-20 as we make it into Sunday afternoon. And rainfall totals could be anywhere from 2 to 3 inches. So this is going to bring some beneficial rainfall to our area. After this rain moves out, though, we are looking at much colder air rushing in by early Monday morning. That's going to drop our temperatures into the teens. And so what that means is there could be a few slick spots on the roads as you're headed out to work or school early Monday morning. We're going to talk more about the exact impacts for different locations, and we're going to talk about that cold air on the way coming up in just a few minutes. 40s will end up in the low 50s today. We've got cloud cover throughout much of the day. You might want your umbrella just in case, but most of us do stay dry today. Of course, we're looking ahead towards that system this weekend. Look at all these winter weather alerts stretching across much of the country. Alabama included in some of these. And I will point out this dark purple color you see here, that's an ice storm warning. So that's where we're most likely to have accumulating ice that could cause some impacts. But watching carefully all of the counties here in the winter weather advisory for a brief changeover to a wintry mix at times this weekend. And then we've also got a winter storm watch for Calhoun and Cleburne counties. We'll be monitoring whether or not some cool air can be moving in from Georgia, the wedge that could briefly cause a changeover in East Alabama as well. Across our part of the state, though, I do believe most of us are getting rain out of this, 2 to 3 inches possible. And we even have to talk about some thunder involved as well along and to the south of I-20 is where we could have some thunder. And then across the southern half of the state, there's even a marginal risk now for a few strong storms. I've got my 7-day forecast and full forecast coming up in just a few minutes. Today we've got some clouds in the forecast, but most will be dry. That changes though this weekend as we have impact weather both Saturday and Sunday. We are looking at heavy rain for much of central Alabama and a low chance of a switch over to some wintry mix at times. That would cause some minor wintry issues across north, northwest, and even East Alabama as we make it through the weekend. Then all of us turning sharply colder by Monday, dropping into the teens. Any leftover moisture from the heavy rain this weekend could cause a few slick spots on the roads to get you started early next week. So we'll be watching that developing forecast through the weekend. But for Saturday and Sunday, you see those temperatures in the 40s, mainly a soaking rain, some wintry mix for a few spots. And we even have to talk about the potential for some thunder as well on Sunday south of I-20. But light pink color here is where we have that limited risk for impacts. Fayette, Hamilton, Jasper, Coleman, Oneonta, Gadsden. Most of the impacts will be felt across northwest Alabama for the counties included in an ice storm warning. I'm going to break this down in much more detail in my full forecast coming up in less than 3 minutes. Weather changes on the way starting this weekend and lasting into early next week. For tomorrow, rain arrives. We could see a burst of some wintry precip early in the morning hours, but most of that wintry mix is going to be confined to North Alabama. Then on Sunday, a steady soaking rain for much of our area. Some thunder involved south of I-20 with minor wintry issues possible over north and northwest Alabama. We'll be watching East Alabama too. I'm going to break all those zones down for you in a little bit more detail coming up in just a second. All of us turning much colder Monday morning. We're in the teens, and that could lead to some slick spots early Monday morning. So we'll be watching that carefully through the weekend. All the colors you see there, different winter weather alerts. So this is a really wide-reaching, far-reaching system, and most of the impacts across Alabama will be felt within this zone here. Those darker purple counties, those are where we have an ice storm warning, and that means ice could accumulate, causing problems. Now, winter weather advisory counties, all these light purple counties, we do still have to watch these carefully as well for the possibility of a changeover to some wintry precip at times. This could cause some limited impacts for counties like Lamar, Fayette, Marion, Winston, Walker, Coleman, Blount, Etowah, Cherokee, and then a winter storm watch for Calhoun and Cleburne. We're going to be monitoring whether or not cold air can move in from Georgia from the east, causing a quick changeover on Sunday. That may lead to a quick burst of some wintry precip. So in terms of those impacts, limited risk for Hamilton, Fayette, Jasper, Coleman, Oneonta, Gadsden. Places south of there looking at mainly rain, and we do have to talk about the potential for some thunder as well. Breaking it down for you hour by hour. First warning future track this evening. We are dry, but we've got clouds building in. Watch what happens as we move into early tomorrow morning. You start to see kind of a quick burst of some light rain, maybe a light wintry mix in the early morning hours, but then a continuation of some of that wintry precip over north and northwest Alabama through lunchtime tomorrow. Green filling in across the rest of central Alabama. So rain increasing the second half of the day, but where you still see the pink is where we could have some of that light accumulation of ice. Into Sunday, you start to see some of that cold air trying to work in from the east, and that could cause that brief changeover over East Alabama. And look at all this heavy rain. We're talking 2 to 3 inches across much of Alabama. We need the rain, but we're actually going to be warm enough that we could even introduce some instability, which means some thunder possible, especially south of I-20 as these heavy bands of rain move through. Eventually that comes to an end late Sunday night, and we'll be watching to see whether or not some of that could freeze and cause some slick spots early Monday morning. In terms of the ice accumulation, pink zones here are where we could have that changeover at times that could lead to a few slick spots during the weekend, and then all of us will be monitoring for those slick spots early Monday. I mentioned the risk of some thunder. We'll check it out. We now have a marginal risk across really the southern half of the state. South of Montgomery is where we have a little bit better instability now that we're trending warmer. And so we will have to watch for a few strong storms with the potential for some gusty winds. Overall tornado threat very low, but not zero across South Alabama through the day on Sunday. So for most of us this weekend, it's a wet one. We're talking 2 to 3 inches of rain. And with some of that ponding, we could be talking about those slick spots early Monday. And this is why I wanted to show you where our temperatures are going to be by the time you're headed out the door. We are in the teens. Feels colder than that when you factor in the wind chill, but with those temperatures dropping so quickly, that's why we might have a few slick spots around. Keep a close eye on North Alabama for some limited wintry weather impacts. For today, out the door, we're in the 40s. We've got clouds around throughout much of the day. At this point, it looks like we're going to be mainly dry. There's just a really low rain chance, but that all changes this weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. We do have rain in the forecast. Some ice possible over north and northwest Alabama. We'll be watching East Alabama too, but really limited accumulations or problems across our part of the state. We're actually going to have to watch for some flooding concerns with all that rain adding up. Earlier this week, we'd be talking about a much different situation for this weekend. Fortunately, we've been trending a few degrees warmer, and now we're looking at mainly a steady rain this weekend with a wintry mix at times for a few communities. So let's break it down in much more detail. I know a lot of you trying to make those weekend plans. And so as we start the first warning future track early tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., you see a quick burst of a little bit of pink here and there. So a little bit of wintry precip early tomorrow morning, but really no impact from that. It's where we continue with the pink through the morning hours that we could start to see some light accumulations, some light impacts, say for Lamar, Marion, Fayette, Walker, Winston into Coleman counties. Watch what happens though as we get towards the evening hours. This is 5 p.m. tomorrow. More rain increasing across Alabama. That freezing line moving a little bit further to the north, and then most of us dealing with just a rain into tomorrow evening. The exception being if we can get some cold air pushing in from the east, from Georgia into East Alabama, that could cause a brief changeover in some of that precip to a wintry mix for communities like Gadsden and Anniston, over towards Ashland as well, late tomorrow night into early on Sunday. Move into Sunday, and we could even be talking about some thunder along into the south of I-20 as this band of heavy precip rolls through into the evening hours. It could drop anywhere from 2 to 3 inches of rain. We're in desperate need of the rainfall, so we're happy to have it in the forecast. But of course, we will be keeping a close eye on things and how those wintry bursts of wintry precip play out. In addition to the heavy rain, We've got some really cold air moving in Monday morning, and that could cause some slick spots on the road. I've got a closer look at that coming up in just a few. We've got temperatures in the 40s, so a little bit chilly by the afternoon. We warm into the low 50s, so really not all that movement in our temperatures. That's thanks in part to the cloud cover that we keep in the forecast. Any chance of rain, though, looks to be very low today. But for the weekend, we're tracking a winter storm that's going to be impacting much of the United States. This is a nice storm warning over the northwestern corner of the state, and that's where we expect some ice accumulation that could cause some impacts. We're also watching for a changeover to a wintry mix at times within the winter weather advisory counties here. This is going to be that light purple color you see on your screen, and then also monitoring for some colder air to move in from the east. That could briefly change things over to a little bit of a wintry mix for Calhoun and Cleburne counties as well as we move through the day on Sunday. The southern half of the state warm enough to even see some thunder, and the Storm Prediction Center has now introduced a marginal risk south of Montgomery for a strong storm or two. We are going to talk more about the weekend forecast. There's a lot to get through here hour by hour coming up in just a few minutes. 5, and we've got some clouds around at times today. Temperatures end up in the low 50s. Low chance of a shower, but better chance for rain as we head into the weekend. Both Saturday and Sunday are impact days. Heavy rain for much of central Alabama, but a changeover to a wintry mix at times. And we are looking at limited winter weather impacts for our part of the state, but all of us turning much colder next week. We're talking about temperatures in the teens Monday morning, and because it's going to rain so much this weekend, if we have leftover moisture on the roads, that could lead to some slicks forecasts that we're asking you to check back on throughout the weekend. But for our area, we've got those temperatures in the 40s both Saturday and Sunday. There will be a winter storm. It just looks like most of the worst impacts are going to stay north of our area, which is a good thing. For most of us, this is going to come as a steady soaking rain. You can see the zone here in green. That's where we're most likely just to see rain. We could even have some thunder at times on Sunday south of I-20, but a limited risk for wintry weather problems for Hamilton, Fayette, Jasper, Coleman, Oneonta, Gadsden. I am going to break down the weekend forecast hour by hour coming up in my full forecast in just a few minutes. In our weekend forecast, we've got impact days tomorrow, Sunday, and into much of next week. Rain arrives tomorrow, wintry mix possible across North Alabama. A steady rain likely on Sunday with some thunder involved south of I-20. Minor wintry issues possible north, and we'll also be watching East Alabama closely on Sunday. Of course, I'm going to break this down for you in much more detail in just a second, but all of us turning much colder Monday. Morning lows in the teens, and because we've got moisture around this weekend, if any of that's still left over on the roads, that could lead to some slick spots out the door Monday morning. So we'll be watching that very carefully. But check it out. All the different colors you see there, those are different winter weather alerts. Dark purple, ice storm warning across northwest Alabama. So that is where we are most confident that we could have some accumulating ice that causes some issues. But a winter weather advisory for all of the counties here in the light purple: Lamar, Fayette, Marion, Winston, Walker, Coleman, Blount, Etowah, and Cherokee counties. That's where we could have a brief changeover to a wintry mix at times, and that could cause some limited impacts as we head through the weekend. Then a winter storm watch for Calhoun and Cleburne counties. We'll be watching for some cold air to push in from Georgia. If that can make it across the border, that could cause a brief changeover in those counties as well. So breaking it down for you just kind of in a different way here. Some ice accumulation possible within the red zone here. Notice that does clip Marion County, so we'll be watching very carefully. Limited risk, though, for the pink zone in a lot of central Alabama, especially along into the south of I-20. Just talking about some good old-fashioned rain this weekend, some thunder possible on Sunday, and breaking it down for you hour by hour in our first warning future track. We'll stay dry through the evening hours, but by early tomorrow morning, as we move into 9 a.m., we start to see a few little bursts of some wintry precip, but look at this steady chance for some wintry precip through lunchtime tomorrow over northwest Alabama: Fayette, Hamilton, Jasper, Arley, Coleman. As we get a little bit later into the evening, say 5, 6 p.m., we start to see that freezing line pushing northward a little bit, transitioning more to a rain for much of central Alabama at that point. By late Saturday night into early Sunday, that's when we have to watch some of that cold air pushing in from the east. That could cause that brief changeover in East Alabama I was telling you about at times on Sunday, while the rest of us get that steady soaking. And this band here you see pushing through could cause some thunder south of I-20 during the day on Sunday. Most of us picking up anywhere from 2 to 3 3 inches of rain. That is beneficial. We do need the rain, but of course we don't want any ice. And there are still some signals that we could see some light icing within this pink zone here. So for northwest, north, and even extreme east Alabama, we'll keep an eye on things through the weekend. We'll also have to watch now for the possibility of some stronger storms across the southern half of the state. We've trended so much warmer that we could have just enough instability, especially south of Montgomery, for a strong storm or two that could produce some gusty winds. The overall for that on Sunday. All of us turning much colder Monday morning, falling into the teens. Leftover moisture on the roads could cause some patchy black ice, and that means some slick spots possible. So wintry weather impact looks to stay fairly north of our area over North Alabama. Today, we've got temperatures in the 40s out the door. By the afternoon, we're near 50. We've got clouds in the forecast, but we should be mainly dry today. But that heavy rain at times this weekend could total more than 2 to 3 inches in some spots. Some ice possible over North Alabama and Northwest Alabama. In addition to that, we'll watch for a quick burst of some wintry mix on Sunday over East Alabama. But for our forecast area, we're talking limited ice accumulation. We'll keep an eye on how things develop through the weekend, but actually watching for some localized flooding concerns with all that heavy rain, and we could even hear some thunder at times Sunday south of I-20. We are going to break down this weekend forecast for you, and of course, much more detail coming up in the next half hour. Or if we would have panned out the way the models were showing us earlier this week, we'd be talking about a major winter storm this weekend. None of us want to be dealing with that. And fortunately, it looks like a lot of us are talking more of a rain situation now this weekend. You can see those temperatures have trended warmer in the 40s Saturday and Sunday. There could still be some bursts of wintry weather, though. So we're going to have to keep an eye on things. Just because it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be doesn't mean that there's not going to be anybody in our state dealing with impacts. So looking towards 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, could be a burst of some wintry precip across central and north Alabama, but it's this zone here in the pink that continues through much of the day on Saturday where we could have those light ice accumulations. So we're talking Lamar, Marion, Fayette, Walker, Winston into Coleman counties. Then that freezing line starts to nudge a little bit further to the north by late tomorrow evening. Steady rain through Saturday evening with some cold air trying to work its way into the east, causing a burst of wintry precip over East Alabama. Some storms even possible on Sunday. We are going to talk much more about the weekend forecast. It will look ahead towards slick spots on the road Monday morning from some colder air arriving coming up in just a few minutes. For that, out the door this morning, we don't have as much rain as we had yesterday, so grateful for that as well. We do keep clouds around during the day, though. Temperatures end up in the low 50s. Looking towards the weekend, look at all of these colors. These are all different winter weather alerts. The purple here may be catching your attention. That's actually an ice storm warning that does cover northwest Alabama, so we're going to keep a close eye on the northwestern corner of the state. That's where we could have those ice accumulations. Winter weather advisory for all of the counties in purple here, and then a winter storm watch for Calhoun and Cleburne. Of course, I'm going to be breaking down this weekend forecast for you in a lot more detail coming up in just 14. We've got clouds in the forecast today. Cool day for us, but mainly dry, but that changes this weekend. We've got heavy rain in the forecast. Some minor wintry, I should say, issues possible over northwest Alabama, even into East Alabama as well. Impact days Saturday and Sunday. All of us much colder on Monday, and because we've got heavy rain in the forecast this weekend, leftover moisture could refreeze, and so we could be talking about slick spots out the door early Monday morning. But let's talk more about the weekend. Mainly a soaking rain, some wintry weather possible north, but really any kind of risk of major winter weather problems looks to hold north of our area. So there's some good news there. However, we do still have to watch for a limited risk. Fayette, Hamilton, Jasper, Aniana, Gadsden into Coleman as well. I'm going to break this forecast down for you in much more detail coming up in just a few minutes. Forecast, let's start with tomorrow, an impact day. Rain arrives, a wintry mix possible over north and northwest Alabama tomorrow. Sunday, that rain becomes heavier, and we could even hear some thunder south of I-20. Minor wintry weather issues north, and we'll be watching East Alabama closely as well on Sunday. I'm going to break that down for you, of course, hour by hour in just a second. But really want to point out Monday as well, because that's an impact day. Morning lows in the teens, and because we have heavy rain in the forecast this weekend, leftover moisture on the roads could refreeze. We're talking slick spots possible out the door, so that's a developing forecast to keep an eye on through the weekend. All those colors you see there, wintry weather alerts for that winter storm that's expected. And this is probably catching your attention here. We've got a bright purple color. That's an ice storm warning over northwest Alabama. That's where we're most likely to see meaningful accumulation from ice that could cause some issues. All of the light purple counties you see here, winter weather advisory. That's Lamar, Fayette, Marion, Winston, Walker, Coleman, Blount, Etowah, Cherokee. That's where we could see some changeover to wintry precip at times and a limited impact possible there. And then in East Alabama, Calhoun and Cleburne counties under a winter storm watch. We'll be monitoring whether or not some cold air moving in from Georgia could cause a quick burst of wintry weather on Sunday. So here are our impacts, or our expected impacts, I should say. Some ice accumulation possible within the red zone here. Notice that does clip Marion County. Limited risk for Fayette, Jasper, Coleman, Oneonta, Gadsden. Much of central Alabama just facing the threat of a heavy rain at times and even some thunder possible south of I-20. So let's break it down hour by hour in our first warning future track. So starting this evening, we're dry. Moving into early tomorrow, quick burst of some wintry precip, but that continues for north and northwest Alabama. So this is what could lead to some of that ice accumulation. That freezing line wobbles a little bit further to the north. We get more of a rain situation in here by Saturday evening for central Alabama. And then now I want to focus your attention to East Alabama late Saturday into Sunday. You see that pink? That's some of that cold air rushing in from the east, and that could cause a quick changeover in East Alabama while the rest of us have a steady soaking rain. Thunder possible with this band here moving through, especially south of I-20. 2 to 3 inches of rain possible for many communities from this. That's beneficial rainfall. We do need it. In terms of that ice accumulation, where we see the pink color here, that's where we could see just a limited threat for some icy spots through the weekend. All of us, though, monitoring for icy spots early Monday morning. And I should note, because we have trended warmer, we've actually trended warm enough to introduce some instability, and enough of that possible over South Alabama, or I should say the southern half of the state, south of Montgomery, that a strong storm or two is even possible as this system rolls through. This would be mainly on Sunday that we have the risk for some damaging winds or even an isolated tornado Sunday over the southern half of the state. Close to home, as we talked about, mainly looking at just a heavy, steady rain at times. And with that lingering moisture on the roads, temperatures in the teens early Monday could lead to some patchy black ice. So we'll be watching that carefully. And then we do have impact days all the way through Thursday of next week. So I'm going to step out of the way here. 40s now, but we'll end up close to 51 degrees. So really not much movement in those temperatures, but we should be at times tomorrow. And we will keep wet weather at times both Saturday and Sunday. 2 to 3 inches of rain by the time it's all said and done. Some icing possible over North Alabama, Northwest Alabama, and we'll watch Sunday. Limited ice accumulation detail. I've got your hour by hour coming up on the other side of this break. Over the weekend. Today we will have clouds that hang around at times. Temperatures end up in the low 50s, but let's get right to Saturday and Sunday. We do have impact days both of those days. And early tomorrow morning, this is 8 a.m. You see a little bit of pink here. There could be a quick burst of some wintry weather, but much of central Alabama avoiding any kind of impacts from this system. That is not necessarily the case, though, over north and northwest Alabama. By lunchtime tomorrow, you still see some pink over Lamar, Marion, Winston, and Coleman counties. That could be some light icing that starts to take shape through the morning hours tomorrow. But by 5 p.m., that freezing line kind of drifting a little bit further to the north, rain filling in late tomorrow evening, and then we'll have to watch East Alabama. So we've got cold air in Georgia. If that can work its way into our state from the east, quick changeover to some wintry precip in East Alabama. Sunday, some storms possible, especially south of I-20. Of course, we're going to be talking a lot more about this weekend forecast coming up in just a few minutes. And you're going to be dealing with some rain if you're out and about throughout the weekend. This morning, though, at least we don't have the rain around, so that's good news, but we are in the 40s. We're going to hold in the mid 40s through about lunchtime, and then we end up in the low 50s later this afternoon. Mainly dry today, but the weekend is when we're tracking that winter storm, and it's going to cause widespread impacts across the country. All those different colors there are different winter weather alerts. This is a nice storm warning over northwest Alabama. That's where I do believe most of the impacts from this system will be felt. But some folks in South Alabama, across the southern half of the state, are going to be on the warm side of the system and could be dealing with some thunderstorms. I'm going to break all this down for you hour by hour coming up in just a few.
A state of emergency for nearly 20 northern counties ahead of this weekend's winter storm.
Yeah, we have this county
Down of what we can expect, Taylor.
Yeah, let's at precip. Early in the morning hours, there could be a quick burst of some wintry weather, but for a lot of us, rain is arriving, and that will be the second half of the day with a wintry mix possible over North Alabama tomorrow, then heavier, steadier rain possible on Sunday. Even some bursts. We'll also be watching East Alabama carefully. So as we move into Monday, we do bring in really cold air, and that means morning lows are going to be falling into the teens. That could be some slick spots early on Monday morning out the door. So that's a developing forecast we want you checking back on throughout the weekend. Here's the latest in terms of those winter weather alerts. You can see that darker purple, that's probably catching your attention. That's actually where we have an ice storm warning, and that's where we're most likely to feel impacts from this wintry weather. Within the light purple zone here, that's a winter weather advisory for Lamar, Fayette, Marion, Winston, Walker, Coleman, Blount, Etowah, and Cherokee counties. That's where we could have a changeover at times to some wintry precip, some limited impacts possible there. And then we're really watching carefully also Calhoun and Cleburne counties for the possibility of some cooler air arriving from the east that could cause a brief changeover there. So limited risk for wintry weather impacts Fayette, Jasper, Coleman, Oneonta, Gadsden, into Jacksonville as well. Along to the south of I-20, we're mainly talking about rain and even some thunder, with most of those wintry weather impacts where we could have that ice accumulation holding over northwest Alabama. Breaking it down hour by hour, first warning future track drive through this evening. Here comes early tomorrow. You saw a little bit of those passing pink colors. That could be a quick burst of some wintry precip, but notice a continuation of the pink through lunchtime over north and northwest Alabama. This is where we could have some of that ice accumulation happening. That continues north of our area through 9 p.m. Saturday, while the rest of us transition more so to a rain. Late Saturday into early Sunday, here comes some of that cold air, and that's what we're watching East Alabama carefully. The rest of us with heavy rain and even some thunder possible within that band south of I-20 during the day Sunday. And we could pick up 2 to 3 inches of rain. We need the rain, so that's beneficial rainfall for us. However, some thunderstorms over South Alabama could be on the stronger side. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I wanted to show you the pink color here. This is where potential ice accumulation could happen. And this is kind of, I would say, worst case scenario in terms of bringing that pink color down a little bit further into our viewing area. We're talking Marion, Fayette, Walker, Winston, into Coleman, and then over East Alabama as well. In terms of that severe threat, the southern half of the system, we're now warm enough that we have to talk about the possibility of a strong storm or two with instability increasing south of Montgomery. A storm or two could produce some damaging winds. Overall tornado threat low, but not zero. So watching the southern half of the state throughout the day Sunday. We're kind of in between those two zones. So we're in between the wintry weather impacts north, in between the risk of severe weather to our south. We've got mainly a steady rain throughout the weekend, but lingering moisture on the roads could lead to some slick spots. So we're going to be dropping really quickly. That means a flash freeze is possible in some spots. And so any puddles could quickly turn to ice. So we'll watch those roads early Monday morning very carefully, and then you'll notice a lot of 50s. But yes, wet at times this weekend. Both Saturday and Sunday are impact days. There could be some wintry weather at times, but I do believe most of the impacts are going to be confined to North Alabama. We start tomorrow with a quick burst of some wintry precip, but then a steadier chance for a wintry mix over northwest Alabama through lunchtime tomorrow. That freezing line wiggles a little bit further to the north, and then we see more of a rain situation into tomorrow evening across much of Alabama, with the exception being East Alabama, where some cold air tries to push in from Georgia. Then on Sunday, we have lots of rain, some thunder possible, especially south of I-20, and then that rain moves out of here, and we're looking at